Welcome to the GMAT Strategy Podcast. You're here because you believe there's a better way to study for the GMAT, and so do I. I created the GMAT strategy to maximize your results and minimize your efforts so you can get to the fun parts about business school and life as quickly as possible. My name is Isaac Puglia, and I've been teaching GMAT classes and tutoring privately for the GMAT for over 6 years, and I personally have achieved a 99th percentile score on an official GMAT exam and helped hundreds of students get into the business schools of their choice. I'm excited to be a part of your MBA journey since I think the world can benefit from the best possible business leaders that we can find. And if this show is bringing you value, please share it with your friends and family who are studying for the GMAT so that together we can make this process as easy and painless for as many people as we possibly can. Let's go. Let's do some more GMAT problems together. Problem number 7 in the 11th edition of the official guide actually has a figure attached to it. So I'm going to describe the figure and then tell you what the problem says, and then I'd recommend you attempt the problem on your own, and then if you have the capacity to do good scratch work, always do that. Have a notebook with you or some type of paper and pen or something like that so you're building good habits, and then unpause the episode and we'll go through a quick explanation and a couple key strategic takeaways for problems like this in the future. So the problem starts with a coordinate plane drawn out, and they have hash marks on the y-axis, and you can see that there's a parabola that crosses the y-axis at 0,3. So it's hitting the y-axis at 3 units above the x-axis. And then the problem states, in this graph, when x equals 1/2, y is equal to 2. And when x is equal to 1, y is equal to 1. The graph is symmetrical with respect to the vertical line at x equals 2. According to the graph, when x equals 3, y should be equal to what? So to describe the figure for you, it's a parabola where the vertex of the parabola is to the right of the y-axis, and as the parabola stretches up to the left, it crosses the y-axis at 0,3. And as it stretches up to the right, we're trying to figure out what is the y-coordinate where x is at 3. So this idea that the parabola is symmetrical about the line x equals 2 is really the key to this problem. And they tell us straight up that when x is equal to 1, y is equal to 1. And then you see the parabola drop down, and it touches the x-axis at x equals 2. So then if you go 1 to the right, that should be exactly the same y-coordinate as we were when we were at x equals 1. And so the answer is going to be 1. Now, admittedly, these coordinate plane questions and geometry questions are going to be a little difficult to do on the podcast, so I may end up skipping over them. Just shoot me a quick note and let me know if describing the figure is annoying or just not that useful so I can save us all a little bit of time. But I do want to give you kind of an interesting tip that I don't see in any books, and that'll hopefully help you out a lot on these coordinate plane style questions. And if you watch the video explanation, you can feel free to check that out if you want to see a visual. Sal draws it in the video. I've got the link to the actual video I'm going through in the description of this podcast, so feel free to click over there if you want a little visual. The key with these types of coordinate plane questions in my mind is make sure that you always take the time to write in the coordinate points next to any points you're drawing on the graph. And you'll actually see Sal do this. He does a really good job of this while he's going through the answer explanation. When the question says, when x equals 1/2, y is equal to 2, he actually puts the little point on his graph at x 1/2, y equal to 2. And then after he puts that point, he writes next to the point in brackets 1/2, 2. He writes in that coordinate point. That's what I would strongly recommend doing on all your coordinate plane questions. It seems like a really small tip because it is. It only takes like a couple seconds, honestly, sometimes less. But that should drastically cut down on the number of unforced errors that you make on coordinate plane questions. And believe it or not, it really often helps solve the question for you because perhaps obviously geometry questions are just super, super visual for most of us. And if you have the right data in front of you, it's going to help a ton. If you need help with geometry, then definitely the Manhattan Prep Strategy Guide I think is really good. Most reputable digital classes will teach you all the geometry content that you want to know. And of course, any in-person class that you feel that you resonate with, or digital live online class that you resonate with, is going to do a really good job of teaching you all the fundamentals of geometry, or reteaching you, perhaps more accurately, reteaching you the fundamentals of geometry and giving you an opportunity to practice those a lot. If you'd like to take a live class with me or another really awesome 99th percentile instructor at TestCrackers, just click the link in the description of this podcast and go to testcrackers.org, and you can use the code TGS for $100 off any GMAT quant, any GRE quant, GMAT verbal, or GRE verbal class. And we tend to teach with a lot more humor and a much less judgmental atmosphere and approach versus other big companies. So if that's something that sounds exciting to you, and you're not necessarily vibing with the sort of more, sterile or formalized environment of some other providers, then you might really enjoy our classes. If you really like that super intense vibe in your class where everybody's competing with each other, TestCracker is probably not a fit for you. And nothing but respect for that. But it's not that our classes aren't rigorous. They really are. We just try to focus the intensity of the class on the material and the problems that we're doing together, and keep things lighthearted otherwise. Moving on to problem solving number 8. I'm just going to read this one to you. There's no graph here. When 1/10% of 5,000 is subtracted from 1/10 of 5,000, the difference is, and go ahead and pause and try that one out. So you've got a couple options when you see these percent translation questions like this. Sal ends up going a pretty typical route with his explanation in the video, which is converting everything into decimals, and I actually do not recommend doing that. I recommend, particularly for people who struggle with this type of question, to use fractions when you're doing percentages, for 2 reasons. First, there's no calculator, so you can often cross-cancel things with your fraction. That's not always obvious to cross-cancel with your decimal, and by cross-canceling, I mean canceling things in a numerator or a denominator when you're multiplying. And then also, the initial wording of this question, 1/10%, often throws people off with the time pressure of the exam, and they just end up having the wrong decimal places. And at the end of the day, really what this question is about is getting the right number of decimal places. So I think one thing that'll help you with that is I would write 1/10, 1/10, a fraction, and then write another fraction underneath that over 100. That's the percent part. And then if I want to, I can start converting that double-decker fraction around if I want to. Now, some of you might think that's overkill. Hey, if you're already having tons of success and you're not struggling with this type of question at all by using decimals, great. Don't change what you're doing. But if you want a tip that I think can make a difference for you, try that out. Also, perhaps obviously, I mentioned this at the top of the episode, but clear scratch work is just going to be insanely important in a question like this, because most of you are going to know the mathematics behind this if you can get the question set up the right way. The main risk that people have with questions like this is they think, oh, this one's not too hard, this one's easy, and so they kind of slack on their scratch work approach. And that's a great way to miss an otherwise relatively doable question like this one. So the real solution becomes 1/10% of 5,000. So a good way to think about this is, in any fraction, if you're dividing by something, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'd take that 1/10 over 100 and turn it into 1/10 times 1/100. And then I would just write times 5,000 over 1. And then that's going to allow me to cancel all 3 decimals. All 3 zeros in the numerator and all 3 zeros in the denominator, and that just becomes 5. And yeah, that's probably more labor intensive and maybe slightly slower than a decimal approach, but I think you'll find that it's much less error prone, like I said. So just know thyself, know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and use an approach that caters to those. For the other one, it's 1/10 of 5,000. I'd do exactly the same thing, right? 1/10, and then 5,000 over 1. There we can cancel just 1 0. So we wind up with 500, and then we're looking for the difference of those two numbers. So that's going to be 500 minus 5, and the correct answer is 495. Last question of the day here is problem solving number 9 from the 11th edition of the official guide. It reads, which of the following is the value of the square root of the cube root of 0.000064? So the question is, what's the square root of the cube root of decimal point, 4 zeros, and then 64 at the end of those 4 zeros? So go ahead and pause, see if you can figure this one out. Everything I said about scratch work still applies in a question like this, but at the end of the day, this is really a very content-focused question, and I think if you understand the way cube roots and square roots and decimals interact, then you're very likely to get this one right, and if you don't know that, then this question is going to be a huge struggle. So the content behind it that I found the most helpful to memorize is first just recognizing that there's 6 total places after the decimal, including the 6 and the 4 and the 4 zeros, and just remember that a square root will cut the number of decimal places in a decimal number in half. So if we were square rooting this first, which we're not, just coincidentally, but if we were square rooting this first, there are 6 decimal places, the resulting number would wind up with 3 decimal places. So remember that. If you're square rooting a decimal, that's going to cut the number of decimal places in half. If you're cube rooting a decimal, that's going to cut the number of decimal places by 1/3. It's going to cut the number of decimal places by 1/3. So here, what's going to end up happening is we're going to take the cube root of this decimal first, so that means that the result of that operation will have 2 decimal places, and then we need to know what the cube root of 64 is. So I would recommend memorizing some of the simple cubes. I'd recommend memorizing 2 cubed, 3 cubed, 4 cubed, and 5 cubed. After that, I really just haven't seen any other perfect cubes come up with any regularity on the GMAT, although correct me if I'm wrong. But maybe the cube root of 6 or something like that has shown up on a GMAT somewhere, but I've never seen it, certainly not with any regularity, but the other ones for sure. Just a quick side note, you'll probably also benefit from memorizing all your perfect squares from 1 to 20. So a lot of us are going to have those first 12 down pretty easily, but you'll also want to know 13 squared, 16 squared, 18 squared, just off the top of your head like that, which most regular adults, they're not walking around thinking about that. So it might require a little bit of memorization. That's probably going to be totally worth it. So cube root of 64 is going to be 4. I would definitely recommend memorizing that prior to the exam so that you're not sitting there trying to think about what is the cube root of 64. Just have that automatic ready to go. And so when we do this first cube root calculation here, we'll wind up with 0.04. 0.04 will be the result. Now we need the square root of 0.04, so we're going to cut the number of decimal places in half. So we had 2 decimal places, that's going to go down to 1. And then the square root of 4 is 2, so the correct answer is 0.2. I hope this helps you out. Let me know if you have any questions. As always, you can find me at the GMATstudy on Instagram. You can find me at the /the GMATstudy on Reddit and /the GMATstudy on Facebook. And as always, my greatest hope is that this information will make your studies as easy and as painless as they can possibly be. And I haven't gotten any feedback from you on whether the going through the problems is particularly helpful. Everyone who's typically downloading the episodes seems to be downloading these past couple episodes, so I'll take that as a good sign. So if you are enjoying this, there's no need to reach out. But if you have any recommendations or suggestions or requests, let me know. With the caveat that I'm not going to be going over any current official guide problems, just for a couple different reasons, but mostly legal. If you would like more tips and strategies for optimizing your performance on the GMAT, just head to my website, thegmatstrategy.com, and check out my free video on how to achieve your goal score in half the normal time and with half the normal effort. And I've gotten a few questions the past few weeks asking me, like, what is the GMAT strategy video class? Like, how is that different from the podcast? And the best way I can sum up what the GMAT strategy class is it has sort of 2 things that it's going to teach you over the course of several, I guess there's like maybe 30 super short video lessons. They're all pretty punchy. It adds up to about 3 hours of total instruction. And the first thing is to optimize your test-taking strategy for test day. And that's going to help you with the half the effort piece. That's really like a huge key there. That's stuff that in the video I go into detail and I tell you that I didn't know any of that when I was originally studying back in the day, and I just had a terrible time raising my score. I studied for 6 months and my score just went down by 30 points. It was terrible. And as soon as I started to learn all the stuff that I teach you in that segment in the class, everything clicked and my score went up by like 80 points and it was awesome. The second intent of the GMAT strategy video class is to optimize your study. So to make sure that you're not overstudying, and that's cutting the half the time piece. So making sure you're using the right study methods. And if you're the type of person who's been studying for 6 months and your score hasn't moved or your score has gone down, or you're the type of person who's done every official guide question for verbal and you haven't seen your score move, or your score is just not as high as you would like, then I teach you the unique review strategies and study strategies that I share with people who take my in-person classes and do private tutoring with me, that I've had just tremendous success with people over the years. And it's not guaranteed to work, but there is a money-back guarantee on the class. So if it doesn't end up working for you, or you're not happy with the class, just let me know, and I'll be happy to refund your money, because I just don't feel that I deserve your money unless I can help you actually get a better score and achieve it with less effort and less time than you normally would. So hopefully that helps you out if you're like, what on earth is this class? So I'm not teaching you content stuff like, here's the surface area of a cube, and here's how to do quadratics questions and how to factor those. I touch on that a tiny bit in the class, but it's mostly these strategic cues that I've been giving you problem by problem in the last few weeks. Things like making sure you're always writing down your coordinate points on a coordinate plane question. Things like how to make sure you're reading word problems the right way so you're not making mistakes, things like that. And in the podcast, I'm teaching you maybe like 10 to 50% of what's actually in the class. So the class would give you a major advantage if you're struggling. If you're not struggling with your studies and you're happy with how your studies are going and you don't want to accelerate them, that's basically what the GMAT strategy class is. It's a study accelerator. It'll help you reach your goal faster and with less effort. If you don't want that, or that's not appealing, then just don't worry about it, okay? But chances are that checking out the video on my website will help you out anyway. So in the meantime, this is a weekly show, so please subscribe, and as always, stay positive and stay consistent with your studies, everybody. I know this is a difficult time in the world for many of us, and I just hopefully am doing a little bit, and in some cases a lot, to just ease your struggles with the GMAT, which is my main goal here, okay? So reach out if you have questions. Otherwise, I'll talk to you all soon.